speaking of YouTube dramas and people that are worried about losing their business, what's your thoughts on Ethan Klein's recent spat with Jordan Peterson?
I think that what we're witnessing is the inevitable radicalization of Ethan Klein because of his Twitter usage. Ethan obviously used to be a sort of anti-social justice commentator. He used to mock all of this, and little by little, and I think it's because of the natural environment of Twitter having purged so many conservatives and suppressing conservative viewpoints, that essentially it just makes it seem like the only and most sensible and common viewpoint is that of the far left. I mean, it's written in Twitter's terms of service that you can't misgender people and things like this. And there are so many, the political environment is so skewed on the platform that it becomes a sort of water in which you swim. And I don't think Ethan Klein is the smartest person in the world. And so I don't think he recognizes that. And I mean, take, for example, the way that he disavowed Jordan Peterson. He was like, you did something transphobic. You said something, you said that. And essentially it was just a list of crimes against progressivism. But I mean, that's the same as an imam coming to me and saying, well, you've eaten bacon, you've drunk alcohol, you've fornicated before marriage. I'm like, okay, but I'm Muslim. You know, these are not my standards. I don't agree that these are things I should care about. And Ethan Klein has adopted them unthinkingly because other people on Twitter, these are the things that the big Twitter, viral Twitter threads and tweets highlight. And so it's put it into his mind that these are important things. But are they important things, or is there something more important in Ethan's life, like his wife and children, perhaps, rather than a very tiny fringe minority of which he probably knows very few people? But this is the thing. This is the problem with Twitter. And you can see this dramatic leftward shift in his content. And now he's hosting a podcast with a guy called Hassan Piker. For anyone who doesn't know, he's a literal communist, and the kind of communist that one would call a tanky.
What's that?
He thinks the Soviet Union was a good idea and that America deserved 9/11. And explicitly. So he explicitly said America deserved 9/11. Yes. Wow. He had to go on. He's the nephew of Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, and he was working at the Young Turks at the time. It was a couple of years ago, and he had to go on the Young Turks and with his uncle and essentially be told he had to disavow this position. He can't say that America deserved 9/11. And the thing is, he refused to do so, and now he's no longer at the Young Turks. Because even Cenk, who obviously hates America himself, was like, look, we can't just say that. You can't just say, we're Americans, we're in America. We're not going to say that America deserved the worst terror attack it's ever experienced. But Hassan, for some reason, thinks the ISIS position is the jihadi position is more legitimate than the American position.
And Ethan's got him on a podcast now.
Yeah, it's called Leftovers, which is a really stupid name, but then they're not very bright people. But the interesting thing about this is that Hassan looks like the smart guy next to Ethan on this. But the best part, even though he's a literal communist and Ethan is basically a communist now himself, the best part about it is their phenomenal success. Their set costs $3 million. And in the middle, between the segments of their thing, I watched an episode of it, and they have to do 3 adverts of for buy this product and you'll grow, I don't know, some sort of anti-capitalist chest hair or whatever it is they sell. But it's the most hyper-capitalist thing in the world, and you can see during the shilling Hassan's face. He just looks like he's dying inside. He's just like, this just isn't worth the money.
Got to pay the setback.
Exactly. You got to pay for it all. Got to pay for that $3 million mansion that he lives in. And so by promoting communism, they're literally being as capitalist as possible and dying on the inside. And I kind of love to watch it. I kind of love, because I've never done a shill. I've never promoted a product. I've never had any kind of corporate contract or anything like that. And anything I do on a gentleman's agreement, because I think there's something important there, right? Because it's about not just you are going to be forced to keep your word, but it's about the desire to keep your word. It shows goodwill and good faith in what you do. And so that, I think there's something there. But the fact that I've never had to do the shill, and I'm pro-capitalism, and these communists who are constantly raging about late-stage capitalism are the ones shilling their hearts out. There's just a beautiful irony.
So is Ethan, are you thinking that Ethan's sort of been passively peer pressured in just based on what he sees on Twitter?
I don't think it's peer pressure. I just think that Ethan is not really a very philosophically minded guy. And these people, the ideology itself, and the people who are the authors of the main strains of thought within the ideology are very, very smart. And what they've done for the last 50, 60 years, probably since post-war Europe, the time of post-war Europe, they've established that, look, the way things work in the United States is not going to bring back communism, and therefore we need to undermine this and deliberately engage in what communist Antonio Gramsci called a war of position. So we can see that the society is a very powerful society. It's not going to be overthrown in a revolution like Lenin did against the provisional government. And so what they need to do is wear away the society in order to open up the possibility of going towards communism. And so for the past, probably nearly 100 years now, that they've been creating memes, right? They've been working on ways of cracking open the contradictions or the inconsistencies within our philosophy as the sort of like classically liberal Enlightenment West, and trying to break it apart slowly but surely, just as if, you've got this. You've seen the videos, the viral videos you see on Facebook of like some guy in India or something. He's got this giant stone and he's got like just a couple of metal chisels and a hammer, and he puts a couple of them in and then crack, the whole thing splits open, right? It's that kind of effect that they're going for. They're like, right, there's a contradiction here, there's an inconsistency here, there's something that's just not filled out here. If we just hammer on these bits hard enough, the whole thing starts breaking apart. And that's what they've been doing to us. And they've been doing it very consciously. They know that they're doing this, and they want to do it because, frankly, they think that communism is where we should all be, even though there's never been a good example of communism and never will be. But it's kind of like the unfinished puzzle of the Enlightenment. The smart people look at it and think, I can solve this. This will fix all of our problems. But it's nonsense. But yeah, so Ethan is essentially the victim of that process.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I'm always skeptical about the people that are whatever at the coalface of this. I'm so non-conspiratorial with the way that I think. Like the fact that Ethan Klein could be co-opted into some grand attempt to try and take down the West just doesn't seem realistic. But it seems like what you're saying is that he's sort of a willing, ignorant participant, like a useful idiot.
The problem is it's not a conspiracy. It's all out in the open, and I can just tell you the names of the people who are doing it and the books. In fact, do I have them on my desk? Yeah, there we go. So, it begins with people like the Frankfurt School, which is Theodor Adorno, Horkheimer, Marcuse, and a bunch of others. This is Dialectic of Enlightenment, where they're literally trying to figure out what's gone wrong, why haven't we achieved communism, why is capitalism won? And then this is what's called critical theory. This moves into what we now know as critical race theory, and then that begins with people like Derek Bell. Let me get out my my notes actually. Right, so you've got Derek Bell, you've got Alan Friedman, you've got Richard Delgado, Mari Matsuda, obviously Kimberly Crenshaw, Harlan Dalton, Anthony Cook. You can look all of these people up. I don't have the book with me. It's at work. It's in the office. Otherwise, I'd be able to bring up that huge book. It's just called Critical Race Theory, The Key Writings that Form the Movement. It was edited and curated by Kimberly Crenshaw, and she's got a bunch of essays in here. But a bunch of the essays that she's written in Harvard Law School, this was, back in 1987 and 1989, I think it was, that she expressly says this. But, and in various other writings of critical race theory, you can find this. For example, she's got an essay called Race, Reform and Retrenchment, Transformation, Legitimation, and Anti-Discrimination Law. And this is where she says, and I quote, she wants Gramsci to she wants to use the Gramscian tactics to begin withering away our society. And therefore, she says she wants to adopt the problem is that a legal strategy will not include redistribution of wealth. Right, that's what she thinks, and so you can see exactly she's a communist. She is interested in achieving communism, and she is in the legal arena, the legal academia, and she can't get the redistribution of wealth that she's looking for through American law, because American law is, of course, based on classical liberalism, which is fundamentally based on the right to own property. Communism, of course, is that nobody owns property. So this is never going to happen. There's no justification for it. And so what she does is realize, well, if we can essentially expand the definition of the words, because one of the things she points out is that, look, if I just come in and say, right, we need a revolution, then all of the systems that are just carrying along happily, and she tries to put that down, they're just going to bash her out of the way. It's like, we're not having a revolution. Get out of here. You know, we've got a constitution, for example. But then she realizes, well, what we need to do, and she says, literally, she says this, quote, demands for change that do not reflect the institutional logic will probably be ineffective, which is true. This is the demand for revolution, not going to work. And so what she does essentially slides into the institutional logic and expands the definition of the words that they're using in order to encompass their antonym. Now, for example, she, in this particular essay, uses the example of racism. Racism, she gives two definitions, the expansive and restrictive views of racism. What? Who consents to this? Who agrees that there are two definitions of racism? I don't agree with that. Racism, in my opinion, is the conscious act of discriminating against someone because of their race, because you do not like their race. But that's not her definition. Her definition is an outcome that can be categorized based on races that shows some kind of difference. I don't agree that's racism, but if she redefines it to be that, and then proliferates this view of what racism is, which is now a systemic, structural, everything around us is complicit in the average white family having more wealth than the average black family, then suddenly our entire society becomes racist. And now you can see how the critical race theorists are saying, well, we live in a giant racist society. It's like, okay, but you can never point to an act of racial discrimination, but they don't care.
They
because
don't need
we're not
to.
using. Sorry?
They don't need to, because they've concept creeped it and expanded it out. Yeah,
precisely.
So is it the case with Jordan? Is he tainting the purity of Ethan when you look at his back catalogue?
Yes, without a doubt. And notice how this came unprovoked from Ethan Klein as well, right? So just to quickly finish this off, basically Ethan has found himself he's in this river, right, that's been redirected to the critical race theory view of things, the woke view of things. Sorry, I've got a massive spot there because the other day I was reading something and I had a spot and I just kept scratching it and it looks gross. And I'm trying not to scratch it now. Ethan is just in the river of wokeness. Wokeness is critical race theory. That's what it all comes from. And again, Kimberly Crenshaw is basically the chief strategist of this, because in her essays, she was writing, well, look, it's not just we can do this for black people and black women. And she coined the term intersectionality because she was writing an essay about the intersection of how the way that American civil rights worked at the time, this was back in the 90s or the 80s, is that they would recognize oppression because you're a black or because you're a woman, but they didn't intersect into black women. And if you think about it, this was inevitable that this would come about. You know, if you envisage a world that blacks are oppressed or women are oppressed, then why couldn't you have black women being oppressed? Doubly oppressed. There's no reason that this logic wasn't going to come about at some point. And Kimberly Crenshaw was the first one to identify it, coin the term intersectionality. And from this, she even says, well, we can do this with the gay community, with the trans community. And this is back in the 80s and 90s, she's saying this. So you can see how long these ideas have been on the pot for, on the boil, right? And it's not just her, of course. It's dozens and dozens of different left-wing academics, communist academics, because they're looking to destroy what they call the patriarchy, the inherited structures of classical liberal society in the West. Because these are the things, as Gramsci says, are preventing the communist revolution. And they're not wrong. Like, they're not wrong that the fact that we've got families and business owners and properties and governments and rules and laws, yeah, these are all preventing a communist revolution. That's true. That's why we have them. We don't want a communist revolution. We want a prosperous society where we can feel safe and secure and we know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I'm going to wake up and my car's going to be in the driveway and things like this because I own it. That's much more preferable than no one owning anything and the state having total domination over everything we have, which is not even the end of what they're aiming for in communism. But the point is, this is the entire basis of woke philosophy. And Ethan is the victim of the memes, that the mimetic warfare they've been engaging in. So what they're doing is saying, well, look, trans rights, Ethan. And he's like, well, I mean, they're human beings. Of course they have rights. Everyone has rights. But what's a trans right? Why would you bring that up? Why wouldn't you just say human right? It should be exactly the same thing, should it not? Except a trans right is something new now. It's something different. There are apparently rights that trans people have that I don't have, for example, which is implicit in the construction of the phrase trans rights. And Ethan, being a bumbling idiot, he's just like, well, of course I don't know. Of course I believe in this. But once you start going, he's put like a foot in the river, and then, affirmations and people retweeting and the general sort of radicalizing effect of Twitter, getting in bed with other leftists who then take him down the sort of mimetic paths that they bring you on. And now he's like, and notice that he just comes out and just out of nowhere. No one was saying, Ethan, you have to disavow Jordan Peterson. No one was saying it. This is an old interview. But he just came out and was like, I'm going to take down that Jordan Peterson interview. It's like, okay, no one's making you do that, Ethan, but you've chosen to do it because you've accepted a series of premises that have led you to the conclusion that actually you used to be a terrible person. And it's like, that's weird, because it looks to me and all the world like you're the terrible person now. Like, Ethan used to do decent things. He used to actually help people. He used to do a bit of investigative journalism occasionally, and he used to entertain people and just, be an entertainer. He wasn't the active piece of shit that he has become. Like, you can see this in his betrayal and deception of Steven Crowder. It was just a scummy thing to do, absolutely scummy. And the way he's going after Joe Rogan, the way he's going after Jordan Peterson, people that I would consider to be people of high moral character, people I've both met, I've had conversations with them. They did not seem in any way deceptive. They seem to exhibit virtue in their daily lives. They have millions of adoring fans because of their virtues. And you've got this fat communist idiots going, they're bad people. Ugh. Shut up, Ethan. You're the useful idiot of a bunch of people who are trying to overthrow the West, frankly.
What's happening, people? If you enjoyed that, then press here for the full, unedited episode. And don't forget to subscribe. Peace.